This is WBSM On Demand.
Got no sleigh with reindeer, no sack on my back. You gonna see me coming in a big black Cadillac. Oh, the Christmas time, baby. Christmas and the snow is falling on the grass. Well, you be a real good little baby.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Chris McCarthy. Of course, that's Elvis Presley. When you hear Christmas music, you know it's time to head to Carter's Clothing and Footwear, clothes that fit your South Coast lifestyle. Owned and operated since 1947 by the same family. They still run it right now. Sometimes you go down to Carter's, either in downtown New Bedford or in Fall River. You'll run into a member of the Carter's family. They might even be waiting on you. You'll know it because they're consistently friendly and helpful. All the employees at Carter's Clothing and Footwear are consistently knowledgeable and friendly. I know we had Kristen in here who works here at WBSM. She was down there the other day doing her Christmas shopping for her family members because Carter's has great American brands you know, brands you trust, at prices that can't be beat. And it's just a fun experience. Kristen was laughing, had a good time shopping at Carter's Clothing and Footwear. Most of all, you just pull in and get out, right? Pull in, the parking is free in downtown New Bedford and in Fall River. Free parking, go in, do your shopping, and get right out, right? You can even trust them with a gift card. Sometimes stores, you can't really trust them, right? That's not the case with Carter's Clothing and Footwear. All kinds of great clothing there, New Bedford-centric gear and everything. So head to Carter's Clothing and Footwear in downtown New Bedford and on Plymouth Ave in Fall River. Tell them, hey, Chris McCarthy sent me. We're now joined by friend of the program, Ted Nesi, the political editor over there at the television station, WPRI Channel 12. Good morning, Ted. How are you?
Good to hear from you, Chris. Nice to have Elvis as my lead-in today.
It's tough to follow up the king, though.
It is. I know. I haven't picked my Christmas selection that I'll be singing at the end of this segment, you know.
Fortunately, we have a dump button, Ted. So
yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Ted, we have a lot of big news. Let's start from the nation's capital on down. The unprecedented pardon of a presidential son, Hunter Biden. What is the reaction to that among the people you're talking to, Ted?
You know, Chris, the smartest thing I've seen about the Hunter Biden pardon in the week and a half or so, I guess little over a week since it came down, someone said Donald Trump's secret weapon is that he gets his opponents to violate norms in anticipation of him violating them later. Right. And I thought that was such a good point where, Democrats will say, well, Trump's saying he's going to weaponize the Justice Department against his political enemies and go after the Biden family, so Biden had to do it. But, he hasn't done that yet, and so therefore Biden's the one who took a very unprecedented step here, pardoning his kid and it's Tim White, who covers law enforcement and courts more than I do, pointed out to me, a very sweeping pardon. It's not just on the cases that have been adjudicated. It's anything he did that was criminal over this period of time. And I think generally I would say, as we always talk about, Chris, everyone in the federal government I cover is a Democrat because that's who's in office in this region. And I'd say generally speaking, this was not a popular move. Right. The only one of the sort of 6 to 8 lawmakers I cover across Rhode Island and Massachusetts who expressed any kind of support was Gabe Amo, the new congressman in Rhode Island, who couched it again as listen to Donald Trump, how can Biden trust these DOJ nominees to treat his son fairly, et cetera. But, Elizabeth Warren called it, a mistake. Everybody should, whether it's Trump or Hunter Biden, they should all play by the same rules. You heard that a lot. Sheldon Whitehouse, again, a very liberal Democrat, saying how frustrated he was that Biden used the same kind of deep state DOJ language that Trump will be using and does use, all of that. So, it seems like it's handed Trump a great talking point and his supporters coming into 2025 to say, hey, look, Biden said himself, you can't trust these prosecutions, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
We're speaking with Ted Nesi from Channel 12 WPRI. He has a column. You should read it. It comes out every Saturday called Nesi's Notes. I read it every week. It's a really a must-read column. Ted, I wonder if, because I know you also cover the media, certainly in your column, I wonder if this will stimulate anybody in the mainstream media to look a little closer at the reports that the Republicans have generated about the fact that Hunter Biden was going around the world collecting money from communist Chinese, Russians, Ukrainians, people all over the world, were giving him millions to Hunter and his uncle for what appears to be nothing. I wonder if this will stimulate the pardons, more interest in that story.
Well, look, I think there's always a question for newsrooms and particularly in mainstream media newsrooms with both parties about, look, if there was anyone had a sign that Biden himself got money from Hunter, you'd see Watergate coverage. Truly, I do believe that. Like, I think when it's
there's $400,000.
Look, everything I've read, and I am not an expert on the Hunter stuff, is that there's plenty of bad stuff with Hunter, but the paper trail is just not as clear on the president himself. And look, hey, if the whole mainstream media is missing it and I'm part of the problem, there it is, okay? But I just think it's if you look at with Trump, it's like with Jared Kushner. He's making deals all over the world. He's getting money, but he's not Trump himself. And so I do think that's part of it. But sure, maybe it will be with the pardon. People look more closely at it. I don't know. But I also do think to some extent the Bidens are going to feel like old news, with the president leaving office and Trump coming back. But I could be wrong about that.
We're speaking with Ted Nesi. Ted, you had the chairman of the Trump campaign here in Massachusetts, former Bristol County Sheriff Tom Hodgson, on Newsmakers with you and Tim White this weekend. How did that go?
Well, it was so interesting because, I really wanted to have former Sheriff Hodgson on because, I looked up the final numbers, and Trump, Harris only won Bristol County by about 1.5 points. And just to put that in perspective, Obama won Bristol County in 2012 by 20 percentage points. So you've had almost a 20-point swing. And yes, turnout was down a bit in some places, et cetera, but clearly a big shift. And so I wanted to hear kind of how Tom Hodgson explains it because, it's not like Obama was a conservative, right? So these are voters who not so long ago were supporting a pretty liberal Democrat, Barack Obama, and have shifted partly, I think, because of Donald Trump. And so Hodgson was saying, he heard all through the campaign from people who said, I've been a Democrat all my life, but I'm voting for Trump. I found so interesting Hodgson's comments around immigration because I think one lesson a lot of reporters took from the last Trump administration is, Trump's a showman. Trump knows the media. Trump says a lot of things, but what he says isn't always what he's going to do, right? And sometimes I think we in the media have overreacted to Trump's words, and then when he does something more modest than whatever he initially said he was going to do, we look silly because we did the coverage of what he said he'd do, but that's not what he did, So I'm trying myself to sort of be a little more judicious about, all right, Trump might say he's going to do X, but let's actually watch the policy roll out and then cover that. And I thought it was interesting. Tom Hodgson saying, Trump's calling for mass deportations. People read that as all 10+ million undocumented immigrants, whether they're, criminals or sort of people just working off the books are all going. And Hodgson said, no, he thinks it's going to be more targeted than that. They're going to start with people who've committed crimes, et cetera, which doesn't necessarily shock me because that, I think, is where you have much, much more political consensus around deporting, but it's not always how Trump's rhetoric sounds. So I found that really interesting.
We're speaking with Ted Nesi. Ted, I agree. I wonder what's going to happen. Of course, Massachusetts, and maybe to a lesser degree, Rhode Island, are going to be ground zero because we give driver's licenses here. Rhode Island gives driver's licenses to undocumented aliens. We, of course, are in a state of emergency, and the governor here in Massachusetts has no idea how to get us out of it. We've been in a state of emergency now for months, if not over a year, because of the migrant crisis. Yet she wants to oppose everything Donald Trump does. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this is why this is going to be it already is a really hard issue for Democrats. I mean, just look at what happened with Biden, where he came in, he campaigned against Trump's policies. He flips a bunch of the asylum policies, and then within months, the Democrats are struggling. They're like, well, we don't want this many people to come. Well, the problem is, they changed the policy, and then those people came, and so they own that. And then by this calendar year, Biden and the Democrats are trying to working with the Republicans to pass all these asylum changes in the border bill that failed in the end because Trump opposed it. Same thing with Healy. She wanted that border bill. Elizabeth Warren opposed it, along with the Republicans opposing it. Mm-hmm. And Healy's now stuck between trying, I feel like every couple weeks you see the Healy administration announce some sort of tightening of the rules, how long you can stay in a shelter, et cetera. I think there have been cost estimates, over $1 billion is going to be needed for the migrant shelter program this year. And Healy clearly doesn't want Massachusetts to be shouldering its own mini, asylum program for the whole country. And yet there's the right to shelter law is there. She also doesn't want to sound like Trump on immigration. I think it's going to be hard. Frankly, it might be one of those things where we see this in politics on both sides, right? Where a politician, you say one thing but pray for the opposite. So Healy will say, oh, Donald Trump, he's doing these terrible things, blah, blah, blah. Whereas deep down, her administration might say, I hope they do get their arms around the immigration problem because we need help in Massachusetts, even if I don't want to say that out loud. No one told me that, but I do wonder that sometimes.
Ted, I think that all the time. I think, and I kid with some of the reps and senators that I'm friendly with from this region that Trump is doing you guys a favor because this is unsustainable. They've all said it. Montigny, Rodericks, Markey, they've all said this is unsustainable for the state of Massachusetts. So Trump is going to do them a favor even if they don't really appreciate it.
Right, and I think very, very, very big picture, there's just been a tension. It's always been interesting to me. Years ago, I read something in a British newspaper that sort of, without even thinking too hard about it, was a fairly liberal writer, I think, too, saying how crazy it was that America had no real policy around migration and its borders. And they weren't even saying it in a hostile way. This wasn't someone who was anti-immigrant at all. They just found it strange that America sort of has a policy of, allow a lot of people to be in the country illegally, don't actually, just let everybody in and have open borders, but don't enforce the rules you have either. It's just the American immigration policy is a total mess. I think Trump saw that clearly. Frankly, Tom Hodgson did too.
Yes, before Trump.
Remember 2007 where Ted Kennedy and John McCain were trying to get that immigration bill through. Everyone thought that would go through. You had two titans of the Senate, and it failed. And then again in 2013, the bipartisan immigration effort failed because I just don't think the consensus of the voters has been where Washington is often. So I'm curious now. The problem is Trump sometimes when he goes too far in what he says, he loses people who actually might agree with him if it was a little more moderated. So I don't know if there's going to be a backlash against Trump next year and everything. That remains to be seen.
We're speaking with Ted Nesi of Channel 12 WPRI. You can read his column on Saturday mornings. It's Nesi. Oh, you can read it now. It's Nesi Notes. It's on WPRI.com. It's up all week. Speaking of illegal aliens and the policies around them and some of the ramifications, we had a former illegal alien, now turned citizen and city councilor, indicted in the city of Boston. This is a really big story, Ted. What do you make of that?
Well, first, I was disappointed. Providence is really slipping. We haven't had a corruption scandal, this like classic in quite a while. So we're clearly giving up that. Yet another thing, Providence is losing to Boston. I shouldn't be flipping. It's not good, obviously. No. Probably corruption. I'm just being silly. But again, innocent till proven guilty. I have to say that, alleged, et cetera. But the offense alleged here, taking cash, I think in a bathroom, right? Chris, the counselor, allegedly did from a staffer, and it was a kickback. I mean, it's just absolute classic, old-fashioned political corruption. Yes. And so, it's interesting to watch Mayor Wu. I admit I haven't read the clips this morning out of Boston on this, but, she called for her resign. The counselor didn't resign. Over the weekend, I heard a news bulletin saying that she was escalating her calls for her to resign, but I've seen in Rhode Island sometimes where people who get in trouble for this kind of thing just don't resign. Right? They just stay there because they say, well, no one can force me out.
Yes.
I want to hold on to the pay. I want to hold on to the benefits. Maybe it's some leverage with prosecutors if I cut a deal later, that my resignation is part of what they get out of me. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
Ted, very local, but I think it's it's very important to bring it up now. So they have no way of getting rid of the now indicted Boston City Councilor. And the Boston Globe points out that the last time this happened, Chuck Turner was indicted, same district up there in Boston. And when the city council expelled him, he sued, and it cost him about $1 million in legal fees and the settlements, the lawyers' fees, all that stuff, to get rid of Chuck Turner. He got, like, his lawyer got paid, and he got $60,000 personal money on his way to federal prison. So the city of New Bedford has no way to get city councilors out either. Last year, John Mitchell put forward a very reasonable recall petition, I think based on his experience as a U.S. attorney, prosecuting cases in Boston, and based on his own local knowledge. Yet the New Bedford City Council killed it. They killed it.
I feel like that flew under the radar, Chris. That just happened a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
And I haven't seen a lot of coverage, and that's no aspersions on the reporters in New Bedford day to day, who I know are working hard and are kind of spread kind of thin. But that came across my desk, and I was surprised, honestly, because as you said, it seemed like a fairly modest reform.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right that we see in Boston, it's also, by the way, the case in Rhode Island has very limited and very strict recall rules, and it's been a major impediment at times to taking people out of office, because sometimes you'll get folks, I haven't heard this in Boston, but I'm sure people are saying it, the voters put this person in, nobody can take them out, it's not my job as a different elected official to pass judgment, blah, blah, blah. Well, a recall is a good way to let the voters speak again. I mean, that's what happened in Fall River with Jazel, it's been done before. So, I don't know, I think sometimes I wonder if, and it's, again, no criticism, but as the Standard Times is not as widely read as it used to be, like every print newspaper, you wonder if that's the kind of story that 25 years ago, Chris, or 30, 40 years ago, might have gotten a lot more play because there were just more members of more city residents paying daily attention to city affairs, and would have been a much bigger debate. Whereas now I feel like sometimes those kind of things fly under the radar because people are paying less attention than ever to local news, city news.
No, I agree with you. I thought it was a really big story, basically because the city council acted in their own self-interest to preserve their paychecks, health insurance, pension credits, rather than to create a mechanism by which a corrupt colleague could be expelled. It's amazing.
And can you imagine, I mean, again, I'm a reporter. I'm open to the idea that for some reason voters would oppose this, but I also have been doing my job long enough to think this is probably something, if we took an opinion poll in the city, 60, 70, maybe more % of voters would say, yeah, let's have that in the city law, make sure it's well written and it's not abused. But I just can't imagine that the constituents of these city councilors are saying, yes, kill the recall. Make sure there's no way to get rid of you guys if you do something wrong. Right? Are they getting emails like that say, dear counselor, I do not want a recall provision in New Bedford. Make sure they're in there for life. No, of course not. Like, that's just not how public opinion works. But if people aren't paying attention, you can get away with this kind of thing.
I think it's really interesting, though, that John Mitchell, who I think was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I could be wrong, when Chuck Turner was indicted, and
he might have been.
Yeah, I think the timelines are about close. If not, he was just recently going in, but certainly John pays attention, and he saw as we all did, the problems that the Boston City Council went through because they didn't have any way to get rid of him, and that the taxpayers ultimately had to pay Chuck Turner almost $100,000, and his lawyer they had to pay $100,000 to get rid of him. Because I've also come to think, Chris, that in states like Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and probably in states like Alabama, too, from the other way, where there's so little political competition anymore, right? Everyone's a Democrat practically. Right.
We always know how the general election is going to go. It's even more important to have other ways of other checks and balances, because you just can't say that now the check and balance is going to be some opposing candidate in the fall election. So turnout is so low, so few people run. If it's a party election, usually the Democrat's going to be able to win, other than an unusual circumstance like this past November. So again, all the more reason you'd think you'd want other types of checks and balances. Now, look, maybe there's some fatal flaw in the recall idea that Mitchell put forward. I'm not an expert, and it's not my judgment, but the council clearly killed it and felt that way. But the basic idea of having a mechanism seems pretty common sense,
right?
I would say.
I mean,
if I can say that as a reporter.
Well, you're a citizen too, so you get it. I mean, you live under the same government we all do, even though you're over there in Rhode Island. But
yeah, that's a different kind of government.
It is a different kind of government. The thing that jumped out, that didn't really jump out to me, but I read deeply through the indictment of the Boston City Councilor, and one of the things, how the feds got to her, was that her victim, her staff member who was being extorted, was using a Rhode Island chartered bank, Citizens Bank. And there's a lot of those here in Massachusetts, right here on the South Coast. So there are political candidates who have their political campaign funds in Citizens Bank, even though they live in Massachusetts. And I wonder if they realize that makes them, should they make some mistake with their, or fraudulent activity with their campaign funds, subject to a federal investigation.
Right, yeah, right. Because you're crossing the border with it. Yeah, right. I also, you and I were texting about this, Chris. Rhode Island had a big scandal about a decade ago. People might remember the Speaker of the House. His name was Gordon Fox. Got busted for taking a bribe, and they also discovered he'd been commingling his campaign finance money with his personal money, and it was all a mess. And they put in some stricter rules in Rhode Island, including that you had to have separate bank accounts for your campaign money from your personal money. And there's a provision to audit and pull the bank records and everything. I don't know if you know, Chris, if Massachusetts has that kind of strict scrutiny of the bank accounts, because you can have a lot of chicanery if you're commingling all those funds together and just it's all in the honor system.
So I know that because I read the audit letters that come down. They're very interesting reading for the state officials, and the city council particularly is very interesting. What they're spending their money on and what they're claiming it's for. I'm sure it's all on the up and up, Ted. But but it is always right. But it's really interesting when you look at the indictments in Boston and how they got them on federal charges, and you compare it to some of the vulnerabilities I think city councilors and other people have here in Massachusetts because they're using Citizens Bank. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And, one thing it took me years as a reporter to learn was that just because someone does something wrong or even illegal doesn't mean they're going to get caught. Right. That sounds so naive, I know. But I guess, when I was a young reporter, I figured, well, the people who do something wrong eventually get caught and they get prosecuted and blah, blah, blah. And I've now seen examples of people doing things that looked illegal to me, but if no law enforcement official prioritizes that or they're too strapped thin or what, I'm not even saying it's a cover-up, just, they have a lot going on in these investigative offices too. Someone can get away with something. Sometimes it's amazing how long people will get away. Yes. I remember Ray Gallison, a state rep in Rhode Island who was head of the finance committee, for years was mismanaging, and he was head of the finance committee for Rhode Island, and he was taking money and putting it into a nonprofit for himself out of the state budget. It was one of those things, but hey, the reporters hadn't even caught it. The investigators didn't for years. It was only when something else happened that it got caught. And so that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night as a reporter. What are people doing that's right under my nose and I just haven't gotten a tip or I haven't caught it yet? Nothing makes me more nervous than that as a reporter.
If someone had a tip, how would they deliver that to you, Ted Nesi?
Oh, very easy to find me, tipsters. If you're listening today, you can email me, tnesi at WPRI.com. You can call the station. You can email and say, people still send me, Chris, all the time, multiple times a week. Tim White and I both get anonymous letters in the mail, tip letters, sometimes very well written.
Yes.
We even once in a while will still get the kind where someone cut out the magazine text.
Yes.
Because they don't, each letter different because they don't want to get caught. I mean, you'd be surprised. We have gotten very, casually written, limited tip emails that led to a big Channel 12 investigation once in a while. So we really do read all the tip stuff we get in, even if we can't get to every story. So you never know. Your tip might be the one that creates some big investigation if you know something good.
Ted, I really appreciate you joining me, my friend, as always. I'm sure I'll talk to you before Christmas, but if I don't, I hope the Nesi family has a great Christmas.
Thank you, my friend. We're starting my daughter, my 2-year-old, met Santa for the first time Friday night.
That's
very
amazing.
Big. Very big deal. He has a high approval rating in my household.
So she didn't cry?
No, and I thought she would. But she was wary. Wasn't sure about him. Big guy, beard, deep voice, But she didn't cry, and she knew it was Santa. And then she said, bye-bye, Santa.
Oh, that is beautiful. Ted, that is great. I know you and Kim are having a wonderful time with this beautiful thing, addition to your family. Such a great thing. Ted, thanks so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you. Happy holidays.
You too, my friend. We'll take a quick break, folks. When we come back, we'll take your phone calls at 508-996-0500. Stick around. Do you have to move anything? We all have to move stuff from time to time. Well, be an adult. Don't ask a friend with a pickup truck, right? They don't have workers' comp. You don't have workers' comp. Call Long Moving and Storage. They're based in Westport. That's who you want to call for your next move. Maybe you're moving across town or up north, or maybe you're moving down south. You have to get a kid to college in January. Or maybe it's an emergency moving situation because of flood damage or some unexpected event. Maybe it's an estate clean out or junk removal. Perry's team and Long Moving and Storage will make it stress-free. Isn't that what we look for in life? Stress-free. If you don't want to do it, pay somebody else to do it for you. It's a family-owned business, so you know your move will be done personally and safely with all the care of a family business. Right? The team at Long Moving and Storage are going to handle your move with the utmost professionalism because they're our neighbors, okay? So Long Moving and Storage, it's the only name you need to know for your moving needs, right? Your upcoming move. We've used them here at WBSM. They moved a bunch of file cabinets and old 80s furniture right out of here. They disappeared. So reach out to Long Moving and Storage. They're right in Westport. Give them a call. Ask for Perry Long or the other great people who answer the phone there can help you out. Long Moving and Storage. You can trust them. We do here at WBSM. Let's go to the phones. 508-996-0500. Thank you for holding. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
How you doing?
Okay. On that city council recall vote.
Yes.
Was that an open vote?
So what they did is they tabled it.
Okay.
So there was a lot of discussion. Basically, they're just running the clock out until everybody gets sick of listening to them, and then they moved to table it, which is basically to kill it. And that was done by under the chairmanship of Ryan Pereira. He chairs that committee.
How many votes did they need to table it?
The majority of them, but nobody resisted it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sean Oliver wanted to amend it to make the requirements a little bit higher in an effort to get it passed. Leo Choquette was all in on voting for it. In fact, said, let's lower the signature requirements. I'm doing my job. Which I'm sure doesn't win him any favors from his colleagues. But basically, Shane Burgo and Ryan Pereira coordinated it, and Maria Giesta, and they killed it.
Yeah. Well, that's where the people should pay attention.
Yes.
But a lot of the people in the city, you heard that term before. New Bedford is the sleepy bedroom community of Boston.
Yes.
Well, the people do sleep around here. They do. A lot of them are not informed. A lot of them don't listen to your program, the open line. Politicians, election time, come around, especially to the seniors, centers, and things like that. And the seniors, they really don't know what their records are, and they're not informed. But just because these politicians show up and spend a half an hour with them and shake their hand, that's what the seniors have in mind when they go to the polls. Sometimes I wish a lot of these seniors really don't vote because they're not informed. A lot of them are not informed.
No, having someone who's not informed voting cancels out the informed voters.
Yeah, and that's the problem in the city. It is a sleepy community as far as politics are concerned.
Well, I'll tell you what, sir. I know you pay attention, and I would encourage you to help the city councilors not make a major mistake by electing Shane Burgo to be the president of the city council. I think that would be a really bad direction for the city of New Bedford.
Yeah, I agree.
And everybody's got to call their city councilors and tell them, because Shane Burgo has an army of very hard left people supporting him, the Shane Denistas. And a lot of these city councilors are going along with it. They're going along to get along.
Yes. Well, it's just too bad.
It is, my friend. Thanks for the call. It's too bad. And the other part is that you've got a lot of people in the city of New Bedford who don't own property, don't pay taxes, but they vote. And that's who Shane's counting on to support him, because he doesn't own property. He's not like you, who pays property taxes, the highest in the region, really. So you've got to prevent the other city councilors from going along to get along. I mean, it will make my show more interesting. I do admit that I am conflicted, because it is better for me personally as a non-taxpayer in the city of New Bedford. I guess it's better for me and the other non-taxpayer in the city, Shane Burgo. Both of us do better if Shane's the city councilor. I'll have funnier shows, more things to laugh about and cry about. And Shane will get more money and more power and a bigger platform. So I guess, in some respects, screw it. You guys should vote Shane president. It'll be good for both of us, both me and Shane, right? Neither of us pay tax in the city, so what do we care, right? Let's go for it. Stick around. We'll be right back. McCarthy, of course, that's the king, Elvis Presley, right? It's Christmas time. We got a gift. Well, depending on your perspective on life, the gentleman who defended his fellow subway riders has been acquitted. The story is breaking right now. The gentleman who put a very dangerous guy into a submission hold on the New York City subway, and ultimately the guy died. Some question about what caused the man's death. And again, you're innocent until proven guilty, and he was acquitted. His name was Neely. He was acquitted of murder in New York City. So that's the gentleman. He's a Marine, Semper Fi, right? He was a U.S. Marine who understood duty calls, right? And this gentleman, who's dead now, homeless guy, who had recently been incarcerated for punching a woman and shattering the bones in her face on a subway, was again threatening people on the subway. And this former Marine, I guess you're never really a former Marine, right? You're a Marine for life. He did the right thing. And in the process, the guy died. As Bob Dylan said, used a little too much force, and it's the way it goes, right? So he's been cleared, so Merry Christmas. Alvin Bragg made his point, though, right? The Democrat district attorney made his point. Sit down and shut up. Let the chaos reign in New York City. Because the process is the punishment. This gentleman, he doesn't have any money. And now the homeless man's family, who's neglected him, that's why he's homeless. And I agree there's nothing you can do as a family member, often nothing you can do for someone with mental illness. But they're now going to sue. They spend more time outside the courtroom protesting the death than they did with the guy, as far as I understand. And now they're going to sue this man, this former Marine, even because he was acquitted, but they're going to sue him for civil damages, even though the guy's life, the homeless man, drug addict, violent, sadly mentally ill, his life really had very little monetary value. So we'll see what happens. But this kid, I call him a kid, young Marine, who defended his fellow Americans and his subway riders. I'm sure there were some non-Americans on that train he defended as well in New York City. He's been acquitted. Thank God. I'm glad he was acquitted. But Nonetheless, Alvin Bragg, a Democrat district attorney, sent the message. Sit down and shut up. Be quiet. Don't stand up for yourself. Don't stand up for the fellow train riders or anybody around you. Let the chaos and savagery reign in New York City. So the message was sent. That's also the same guy, by the way, who erroneously prosecuted Donald Trump to fulfill a campaign pledge. He went after this Marine with the same vengeance for whatever reason. Probably because he was a Marine, right? You don't stand up for America on Alvin Bragg's watch. Nope, you don't. We'll take a break. I'm Chris McCarthy. We'll be right back. Good news, though. Merry Christmas. I won't sing it for you. I lost my singing voice. I don't know if I ever had one, but if I had one, it's gone now. Anyway, want to, my dad, every time I hear Elvis singing Christmas, it reminds me of my dad. My father spent 2 years in Germany in the Army. He was drafted after college. He replaced Elvis Presley. I would say my dad was the second coolest guy in Germany at that time, right? So every time I hear Elvis, just makes me think of my dad, right? So, and if you got your dad still in your life, make sure you thank him for everything, right? And your mom, and if you are a dad, it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing. 508-996-0500. My dad told me, about spending. There's worse place to be than Germany for Christmas, but it was. He always said it was hard. That was the hardest time of the year, right? To be in Germany when your family was back here in America, and but he got through it, and he did his job, and he came home. Many of you have done the same thing, right? My dad was lucky. He was in the Army. He was drafted after Korea and before Vietnam, and so he never really saw any action. He was just over there in Germany, and he had some great videos and great story. And he learned to speak German. But we have soldiers now overseas, despite what Kamala Harris said. We have men and women of the military in harm's way, really in harm's way. And so think about that the incredible service, the men and women, the volunteers